Badiga. She is a dynamic superwoman, if I can say so.
Oh my God, okay.
Yeah.
I have to go up to that.
And yep. So to the viewers, I would like to introduce a little bit about you. She is a judge in Sacramento County.
Commissioner. Not judge yet. Yeah.
Okay, not judge. Sorry. Yeah, she is a commissioner at Sacramento County Court, and prior to that, she has been an attorney general for quite a few years, and apart from that, she does a lot of community service. And today I am here to get some snippets of wisdom from you. That's why we are here. And thank you very much for being my guest.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, Varuna, for this opportunity and for what you're doing.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, Varuna wants to interview people that provide guidance and a mission of what motivates them and what allows someone to kind of be the best version of themselves, correct?
Yeah. That's my mission. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to reel back to 20 or 30 years.
Oh my God, I'm so old. I'm so old. All right, let's go back.
But that's learning comes from experiences, and as you age, we'll carry a lot of experiences. So the first time you landed in USA is supposed to be the land of opportunities.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine yourself being the woman that you're here right now?
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah.
No, the first time I actually came to the United States as a student, as a graduate student, I was like any other graduate student. Come here and then you always comparing how different the dollar is to the rupee. You're looking at the prices and you're converting in your head. Oh my gosh, water is, in those days at least, 200 rupees or 220 rupees or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was very different.
Yeah, and I think every immigrant goes through that.
Exactly. The mental calculation of
Yeah.
how much everything is. And, I think going to university here really helped because when you're coming from India, you grow up in a certain place. Like I'm from, my schooling was all in Hyderabad.
Okay.
I'm originally from Jaya Badiga.
Oh, okay.
And so I went to an all-girls school. So grade kindergarten through 10, I pretty much had the same kind of students.
Yeah.
And then 11th through degree, I was at a college, St. Anne's, Medipatnam. And again, pretty much similar group of friends. So when you're there and you're studying, you think that, okay, I'm a topper or I got distinction or something. So you think that, okay, I'm so smart. But when you go outside of that comfort zone for the first time into a university where there's people from all backgrounds, right? So in my degree, the program that I joined, there were people from Malaysia, there were people from Africa, from Japan, from the United States, of course, from Europe. And so for the first time, I got a sense of where do I rank academically? How competitive should I be? What do I need to improve?
Wow. Yeah.
And as most of us know, when you come from India, the writing that we grow up with and we're taught is very different from how you learn here.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a research paper was. The first time in my life, and one of my degree requirements was that I write a research paper.
Wow.
So then I'm learning about how do I, format? How do I give credit? How do I do footnotes? Everything is a learning process.
Yeah.
Using the computer, Microsoft Word,
I know. Yeah, I get it. I have gone through a similar transition, and I have no complaints, but only compliments the way we grew, we are exposed to. And then when you meet with different mindsets, it's just that you are thrown into a learning curve where you have nothing else but to learn. So I when I started researching about you, I feel like you had an eventful life. You did your joint masters in international relations and communications, and then you worked in an ad agency.
Yeah.
And then you just said okay, wait, let me go to pursue law. Did an event change you? What was your inspiration?
Yeah, no, great question. A lot of events changed me. But I think, the sense of what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So I started off, as you know, in New York with an ad agency there. and I was doing traditional advertising. And at that time, this whole thing of .com became like a big deal, right? This is what, the late 90s, 99, 2000. And everyone was talking about IPOs, and I don't know anything about tech. At least at that time, I knew less than I know today. And so I was talking to a couple of my coworkers who were leaving this space for .com, and at that time my sister was in San Francisco, so she said, "Why don't you also look and come here?" So I said, "Okay." So looked for an opportunity and found a .com advertising company in San Francisco that was willing. We're bound to our visas and our H1 status and all that, right? So I had to find someone that would transfer. Because I had an H1 already, but they had to transfer it, and so I had to find someone who knew all that. So I found a .com and I came here, and of course I knew nothing about this, and it was just like learning as you go. But that was the first time I was in a startup. And so by this time I had a chance to compare it to traditional advertising. And I must say that this startup experience didn't go that well. And I think because it didn't go that well, I was thinking about, hey, I've already, by that time, I moved to San Francisco in 2000. So by that time, I was thinking, okay, I have years of experience and years of my career to look forward to. What do I do? So then after that, it so happened that, due to various reasons, I moved mainly for my personal life to Sacramento, marriage and all of that fun stuff, right? And so then Sacramento is not as happening as San Francisco, right? Imagine Sacramento and Folsom in 2001. And so it was still very easygoing, low-key. Everything would shut down around 8:30, 9. And most of the media and tech and all of that companies were in Sacramento. Folsom had Intel, but not many other companies at that time. So then I got a job there. And now, so I went from traditional advertising to .com, and now I got a job at a newspaper company. And this is newspaper advertising, which was very new to me. But it gave me a lot of insight into how, when we look at a state, so for instance, we say, oh, California, we say New York, but we don't know local levels as much. But being in this business, it told me, okay, you have to look at the county level, then you look at the city level, then you look at the local level, right? And it allowed me to get a lot of insight into how, people plan. At that time, I had some pretty well-known clients. Now one of them is no longer. So I don't know if you remember a company called Long's Drugs.
No.
It folded. I think it was eventually acquired by CVS. But basically, it was a pharmacy company and pretty, well-known in this area in California. So I was working on their business. And then a couple of other companies, and they were very regular, frequent advertisers. And so by reaching out and learning and understanding the market and the audience, I kind of figured out, okay, this is. Then a few years into that, I'm like, okay, what next, right? I can't see myself in this business 20 years down. And by that time, I think I was probably 6-something years into my career. Then I thought, okay, I want to use these skills for something separate. And so I joined a social marketing advertising campaign. But in that transition, I also wanted to do some volunteer work. So I'm like, okay, I want to, give back to the community. And I started volunteering at a women's shelter. There's a program. So this organization was Weave. At that time, it's was an acronym for Women Escaping a Violent Environment. Now they've rebranded. And if I remember correctly, it is when we act, violence ends. So it's more inclusive, and it kind of has this message of everyone's involved in preventing domestic violence, right?
Not just women.
So I went through, it was an 8-week program where I think it was Saturdays and Sundays, I can't remember, but it was at that time a 40-hour training. And you had to go through that training to be able to do what I wanted, which is to help with the phone calls. They're a 24-hour phone call service to their clients and victims of domestic violence. So I did that, and then I started volunteering, I think twice a week or once a week. I can't remember. It's so long ago. But going to the shelter, it's a confidential location, and kind of manning their phones, I started listening to and talking to people that were calling the hotline at that time, or the crisis line as it's called now, asking for help. And a lot of the help requests were related to the legal field. And I'm going to take you back, even flashback, right? More like from this point, maybe 15, 20 years out. So while I was finishing or getting close to my 10th, my mother had said, I think law would be a good field for you to consider. But at that time, the program for becoming a lawyer in India was a college in Bangalore called Nalsar. And I think if you did, they had an inter and degree combo, where if you applied soon after and got in after your 10th, then you'd have this 3-4 year program, and you'd become, you'd have I think LLB, right? Which is how you become an attorney in India. And at that time I was interested, but my dad refused to let, his youngest daughter or any of his daughters leave Hyderabad and go and study on their own, right? So then that kind of went out the window. So then now all of a sudden, this many years later, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember my mother saying that I should consider this.
So she put the seed, your mom gets the credit, I guess.
Before like 8th, 9th or 10th class, right? From then. So, and while listening to them and listening to what they were asking, and then we had some resources there, right? So we had some volunteer attorneys, we had references to court workshops, so I would give them the standard resources. But I really felt that there's so much need in the community. And what does it take? So that started the wheels in my head turning as to, how does one become a lawyer in the United States? What do you need to do? Right? And by the end of that 1 year that I volunteered, by this time I was in that social marketing campaign, I decided I'm going to apply.
Wow. So did you face any challenges, or did you have to convince a lot of people in your family?
Of course. You already know the answer to that, right? But I think the greatness of this country is where it allows you to really consider these options. I mean, India is also changing a lot now, but I don't know if it has the same ability for someone like me. So at this time, I was in my, how old was I? Early 30s. And I don't know if someone like me in India who was married, early 30s, thinking about, hey, when do we start a family? When do we have a child? And thinking about a career would have the freedom and opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to do this complete, 180 switch.
Yeah, I know. It's like, again, you're starting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so then I spoke to my husband. He was supportive. My parents and my in-laws were obviously like, what about a family? What about children? Like, what's going on? And so my husband and I like, we will figure it out.
Okay.
And so then, I got in. I wanted to go to Santa Clara. I got into Santa Clara. And so we tried moving there and didn't work out. It's as you know, the Bay is very different from here. And here, at least at that time, we bought our first home a few years ago, and moving from there, going to the Bay, where even if you look at $1 million property in those days,
yeah, I know.
in 2000, when was this? 2005, right? We were looking at
I think that's
buying
when
a home there.
went so high.
Just before everything went up. It was still affordable.
Okay.
But at that time, we were able to get homes in Folsom, Sacramento for, $250, $300, $350, $400 range, right? So imagine the Bay would have been double. So we were starting to look at homes in that range, and like literally you're looking at, and you think, oh wow, if you're looking to spend $800,000, $900,000, you'll get a mansion, right?
Yeah.
And you go there, and you're looking at
100-year-old,
50-year-old homes with crumbling steps and like tiny kitchens, and it was just a huge shock for us.
Forget about the backyard.
Oh my God, no backyard, no, absolutely no backyard. And we went and looked at a few homes, and then then I saw, so at that time we had a dog. That's our first baby, right?
Uh-huh.
I saw how miserable my husband and my dog were, and I said, okay, you know what? This is my dream, not yours.
Okay.
You go, stay in Folsom,
Wow.
do your thing. I'll do what I need to do. And so I have a really close friend over there, and we have family there, my husband's family. So I used to leave, I was able to schedule my classes where I could leave Monday morning
Okay.
and then come back on Friday. So for the first year or so, we tried it out where, for 6 months or so, we moved, that didn't work out, and then figured it out. And I think for the first 6 months. Then after that, I just did the whole commute. It was easier. I was back on the weekends. Still had a lot of homework and things and all that.
Assignments.
Yeah, but got through it.
Okay. Wow. But then you're meant to be a lawyer, it took, it was delayed.
I guess so. Yeah.
So I think I should give the credit to your mom.
Yes.
That's me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how is it like after becoming a lawyer, were you able to help the community?
Also in all of this time, right, there was also a part of me that wanted to stay very involved in the community. So I went to law school, finished, graduated, passed the bar, and I started work in the fall of 2009.
Okay.
Right? And by then, we had also become citizens and also had a baby.
Okay.
And so by this time, I started to get more interested in, okay, what's going on around me? And, we'd committed to staying in Folsom and Sacramento and all of that. And then I've always been interested in local politics, and I saw that city council elections were coming up. And I said, why not?
Yeah.
To me, it was more of, I've always been interested at the local level. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the higher level, but for me, it's always a question of where can you influence and impact change.
Yeah, and then it should start with your own community, I feel so.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree too. And so that was something I did with zero mentorship, zero planning, right? Zero thought about what and how this would work. But one of the things that I will credit to even thinking about it is, I think a year or two prior, we had this gentleman, Kumar Kalagara, in our community who ran for school board. Okay. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was 2008 that he ran. And so that kind of also lit a bulb. It's like, oh wow, people are doing this.
Yeah, why can't
there's a role and there's a path, and I can too.
Yeah.
Right? I think you always need, in our community, you need someone to
look up to, right?
Not only look up to, but someone who's done it, or someone who paves the way or creates a path that others can think about, right?
Yeah, and then you just feel like, okay, why can't I give it a try, and then why can't I help people in the way that
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm super proud of you. And then there are a lot of Indians who are trying to, the minorities coming up, because we have different needs.
Yep.
Compared to others. So it's always good to have some people representing different communities and ethnicities to leave a mark or help people with their needs.
Absolutely. And I think it's, you have to participate. I always felt, and I still feel, that if you don't choose to act on your rights, you can risk losing them, right? So if we worked so hard to become a naturalized citizen, and we know as immigrants, we know the process, right?
Yeah.
And because we understand the values of this country, we appreciate the opportunities, the freedom, and everything that we've been given, and we want to give back. So to me, participation is key.
Yeah, and I think for me, I feel if we act, it will be an easier path for our children. And I feel like we are already making that mark. Our kids are excelling a lot better than what we are as second generation kids.
Yeah, and I agree. And also I feel like, our children, as you know, right? You have a young one and I have two. Our children are always looking to us to see what we are doing, what our values are. And as you know, parenting doesn't mean a parent telling a child, hey, you have to be good, do good, study and all that, and they're going to learn. No. that message will sink in maybe this much.
Yeah.
But what sinks in this much is them watching you
Yeah.
and seeing what you do, how you react, what your values are. When are you, getting angry for what and why, and what are you disciplining them for, and
Yeah, I know, because they model what you're doing more
not
than
what you're
you
saying.
say. Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel the same with my child, and she's a very strong-willed kid, so if I say something, she would come back and argue and try to prove her point. So I say like, okay, let me do that, and then let her watch me and
No,
learn from
rightful,
that.
right? Absolutely. And that's right. And that's how it should be. Because I think when children do that, they also, in a way, are expressing their freedom and ability to do that, right? So sometimes a lot of friends or parents will come to me and say, oh, I can't believe my child, they're so headstrong, they're so obstinate, they're so stubborn. And I say, well, I think that means that you're being an excellent parent because you're giving them room to be able to express that, to be able to be
Assertive.
unhappy or to be able to be assertive and to be able to be strong. Because think about this, right? If you don't provide a space where the child feels safe and secure, would they have that ability to do so?
Yeah, and I feel another thing I feel is we are not, most in our generation, people are not letting their kids fail. They are being overprotective. They are not letting them fail a test. Getting a C is like so bad. But my motto is like, let her fail as much as she can when I'm around. So that she's sorted by the time she's like in her late 20s
very
or 30s.
true,
Yeah.
very true. And I really think that as parents, a husband and wife or whoever your partner is, right? You need to sit back and have active conversations on your parenting style because our children are always going to challenge us. It's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
We challenge our parents, and now I feel bad for everything I put my parents through, right? But I was the youngest. I was also the most rebellious, so you can imagine. But that's, I think you need to have hard conversations about this because when things come up, one of the most important things, I'm going to need a tissue, is that you are on the same page and that you've talked about the challenges. So you don't say one thing, the other parent doesn't say another thing, and suddenly there's a lot of conflict in the household.
And then they know how to divide and conquer.
Exactly.
The first thing that they do is divide and conquer.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And you work with, you are a moderator in a panel that works with the teens and mental health issues. I would like to know a little more about like what kind of a work that you do and how does that help Folsom Cordova kids,
So I'll back up a little bit, right? My daughter is now 15, and we as parents in this society especially, typically in most households, we're always busy. Whether or not someone chooses to be a stay-at-home mom or a working parent, we're always busy. Nobody has like all this time in the world in general. And we think as parents that, okay, if we're instilling values, we're ensuring that our children can read, that they're up to grade level, that they're doing well, that they're fine. And we have this thought in our head that, okay, we're feeding them good food, we're taking care of the nutrition, we're making sure they're exercising, their academics are good, so they're good. I think that is one of the biggest issues that we all as parents have is we're not making, or we take for granted that their mental health is also good.
I know, especially like in middle school where
huge transitions. And I feel bad for my kids, right? Because I grew up, you grew up in India too, right? I grew up in India, my husband grew up in India, and so I'm not used to what they're going through. And especially now in the whole tech age, right?
So much knowledge.
That we just don't know how to interact in these situations. So my daughter came to me the other day, not too long ago, a few months ago, and she said, Mom, I'm having a really hard time making friends. And I said, oh, because I never really thought about difficulty
It's an
making
issue.
friends.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when we were kids, I'd go out and play. I knew everybody in the neighborhood, and
Yeah.
I knew kids at school.
Yeah.
And if you want to make friends, you'd hang out with them or talk to them. But now she says, and I said, have you tried talking to her? And she said it's hard because if I walk into a new class, or everyone either is already with the group of friends they know, or they're on their device.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So I was like, I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry, I don't know. And maybe you can, if you can join some clubs or some groups, and you'll find people that have the same interests as you. Yeah. That was one idea. But going back to the issue of mental health, so we're kind of like going into a topic where I feel that there's a need for parents to stay connected and on top of this, right? We all know that kids between elementary and middle school are going through puberty. Yeah. And that along with that there's going to be a lot of hormonal changes. Yeah. That there's going to be development of the child physically and emotionally, mentally, etc. Yeah. What we don't know is whether or not these growth phases and all of that are creating an imbalance. We don't know that. Yeah. And we don't know if that is nutritional and physical or if it's emotional. But what I will tell you with just my intuition is I feel that this is a stage where we as parents have to be super on top of connection with the kids. Not in the sense of keeping an eye on them and monitoring them or anything, but no, not in that sense, but in the sense of how is the behavior reflecting a need? They're not, because the problem that I think we all have, and I will admit I even have it now, is we feel things, but we don't necessarily give a name to that feeling. Yeah. But when you sit back and think, I'll give you a good example, okay? Or a common example, I should say. So if I tell my husband to do something and I come home and he's not done it, I get angry. Yeah. Right? And similar.
Yeah, I know.
You too, right?
I'm with you on that.
Or he'll tell me to do something and I forget and he gets angry. So then, whatever, you have an exchange or, silent treatment or whatever your mode of dealing with that is. But then I don't think we sit back and think of why. Why did we get angry? Yeah. What was the reason? Then does it go to, is it a control issue because I told you to do something and you didn't? Or is it something that I could have done instead of telling him to do when he's got 1,000 other things going on? And I really feel like this is something that we need to sit down and do and also help our children do.
Yeah, and I feel like, with my case, I've done a lot of inner self work myself. Some days I used to wake up, I was gloomy, I was upset. I don't even knew what was that.
Exactly. Why, right?
Yeah. Why am I like this? Because it's a fresh day, you just started your day, but you're grumpy already. And then I had to journal or do something to find out why am I this way? And then introducing that early on with the kids is really
it's
good.
Absolutely crucial. And I think you hit the nail on the head is recognizing. So even I don't have solutions to my moods half the time, right? Yeah. And I'm going through menopause too, which means that in any given day, I'm like, So in my house, it's always whose people are tiptoeing around me, what kind of a mood is mom going to be in today, right? Yeah. But going back to what you said, I think it is absolutely 110-50% vital that we give our children tools. Yeah. Now, you can choose religion as a path, you can choose spirituality as a path, you can choose art, and or you can do a combination of all of these. But you need to give them tools, whether it's meditation and breathing, whether it's exercise and sport, whether it's journaling, art, but self-expression, allowing them to give them a little time to understand what they're going through and why is going to be key to allowing them to, develop and express it. And so going back to this issue on parenting and mental health, my daughter became a teenager over the pandemic, right? And so this was a time where she was in middle school. We already know it's super hard.
Yeah.
Then she was also going through hormonal stuff, and then everything shut down.
Yeah.
So she went through a really hard time, and I was busy at work and I didn't really pay attention until I had to. There were a couple of things that occurred, a couple of long drawn out scenes in our house.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I had no idea she was feeling this way. I had no idea this was going on. So then I took the appropriate, as in, my husband and I took the appropriate steps of finding a way to address this, right? One of the things we did is we realized that she was having a really hard time not being able to connect with her peers.
Yes. Okay.
So then we looked into options, and we were lucky to find a school that even in the pandemic was open in person with masks on. And I have to say that, it's fortunate and a blessing that we were able to do so. I recognize fully that a lot of other parents may not be able to do this, right?
Because and most times they don't recognize until the damage has happened.
Right, and also financially, right? Varuna, I mean, we're all always in a stage of trying, everything's accounted for, or we're trying to make things account, or we're trying to build savings or college funds or send money back to India, whatever it is.
Yeah, there are various reasons why we try to.
Right. Absolutely. And so for me, it was that move helped significantly, because I think one of the biggest needs she had was this need to connect with somebody. And I think during the pandemic especially, I think some parents may argue that though it was great because I got time to spend with my kids, and I agree that's great. But think about your kids. Did they already have a social circle to fall back into that would have supported them? And if they didn't, then how did they feel connected? Right? And so these are all things that I think we need to keep an eye on as parents of teenagers in this stage. And so when we had this really sad event that occurred, and unfortunately teenage suicide is not new in our community, okay? In 2000, when was this? I remember I was in India at that time, and I was reading the news and I was shocked. It's I think it was 2016. We had another teenager that took his own life as a middle schooler in Folsom. Then I've heard of a few more, and then more recently we've had in our community someone something like that. Right. So earlier this year. And then I felt that with everything that I went through as a parent, that no one talks about this.
Yeah, it's still a taboo for some reason.
Yeah, I think no one, I mean, think of how many generations of parents have gone through this with their children in the United States, as immigrants. I know at least of, you know uncles and aunties in our community, right? That have lived here for 30 years before you've come here.
I know.
No one talks about this stuff.
It's still a taboo, and one of the reasons why I'm hosting this podcast is I want people to talk about it, because it's physical sickness, you know outwardly, but mental health issues are like so deep. And it's okay to have fever is as equal to depression, because both are ailments. One is to the mind and the other is for your body, and they have to be treated equally and openly.
Absolutely. And so this panel, I had all of these experts in the community and all come, and it's interesting what you said in we don't teach our children to fail. And I feel like that was a topic that came up a lot in our discussion, where a couple of parents were like, we're not telling our kids to get all A's, but my communication with my child has always been, look, you have the ability to do well. So if you're not doing well, it means either you're being lazy, or you're not applying yourself, or you're not interested. And to me, either of these three things are not okay. But we, I think that, okay, we're saying to our child, we know you can do well, but our child is hearing it as, I've got to get A's. So getting a B or a B minus or a C plus is not an option, right? So it was actually eye-opening even for me, because I went to this panel thinking, hey, I think I'm doing okay as a parent, right? Because I'm telling my child that I know she can do well. And then a couple of people looked at me and like, what makes you think that this child is not thinking that that's pressure? And I was like, oh, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen that, and then my child, like I tell her if she gets a B, I would say like, okay, what have you done that made you get B? So next time, like try to. So that way I'm telling her to be more organized, like time management. So my focus is always like, okay, it's okay to get a B, but try to figure out like why you got a B, like.
But think about the message that the child is getting, right?
Yeah,
that the B is not okay.
Yeah.
But I agree, right? Because we as parents, we always push.
Yeah.
And our parents pushed us, we will push, and that's going to be a cycle that continues.
Yeah, and then like I like to listen a lot of podcasts related to mental health, and then a life coach said that like every adult is a broken child, no matter how much the parents treated like a doll, like a princess, like, or given the hardships, whatever it is, he or she does need to have that healing done, like
I agree. Yeah, and
but we as parents need to learn a little so that we can like prevent a lot of damage.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And then another thing that I would like to bring is about the domestic abuse. You did help a lot of women, and you are into
Yeah, not just, I mean, the percentages of men seeking assistance is lower, but definitely abuse occurs against men also.
So what kind of abuse does men go through?
So let's take it back a notch before I answer that question, right? So when we think of domestic violence, we typically think of physical, that someone's hitting their partner or their spouse. But a lot of domestic violence may not be physical. It could be emotional.
Okay.
From a social end, right? So when I worked at Weave in the organization, we worked with a lot of counselors and mental health providers, and there's a whole science behind this with regard to what is domestic violence. And the two main factors that come up from a social end, this is not the legal end, right?
Okay.
This is a social end, is power and control. When someone exercises power and control to a degree where they're controlling the other person's movements, behavior, etc.,
Suffocate them. Yeah.
that's domestic violence.
Wow.
So from a social end.
Social. Oh, okay.
So when you think about applying that to a relationship, any relationship dysfunction where power and control is so imbalanced, could be domestic violence. And so in that sense, it applies to anyone. It doesn't have to be a woman only.
It could be.
Right?
Yeah, any relationship.
And I'm sure you and I have both seen and know of friends where the power dynamic in a relationship maybe is the woman in that relationship versus the man.
Yeah.
Now, it's not necessarily that means that that's domestic violence, but when we see examples of power dynamics, right, then we know that it's not just men against women.
Yeah, I know. I just want to bring up this story that my mom always encouraged me to study. Like she always said, like if you study and get a job, you'll be independent, and then with financial independence, you have a say. And that's like how it was back in India. Like patriarchy and all. So I never took it serious until like one day I was like 8th or 9th grade. I saw this woman, we lived in a big home where there's a well, like in villages you have a well next to your home, right? This girl, she just ran, and we were like talking somewhere here out, outside under a tree. Then she just ran, and then she threw herself in the well.
Oh my God.
And her husband, I think, he came, and by the time we all also went there to pull her up, and her husband luckily came and he pulled her up, and then she survived, she's fine. That's the first time that click in, like, okay, you know what, I need to pay attention to what my mom is saying, because financial independence, and then when I grew up, financial independence doesn't, you still can get abused or end up in violence no matter whether you're earning or not. But that was like something where I said, like, okay, I need to be better at my studies, I need to think about my career.
It's true. I think financial dependence is a huge issue
Mm-hmm.
because it's a form of control, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about how our parents grew up, there was never a question of in my father or mother's mind that my mother would work.
Yeah, like she's a homemaker and
Right,
she can still,
exactly. And so if I think about it,
Mhm.
the sole income then that my mother has to run the household or to go buy saris or jewelry or whatever is from my father, right?
Yeah, and there was never questions, like, but that's like a,
It was the expectation too that the men
yeah.
would provide for the women, right,
Yeah.
and the children.
But
Yeah.
now I think time and era has changed so much that both have to work, and I think
But I feel like I agree with you because that's my personal sense.
Yeah,
But I also want to take a moment to say that if someone chooses not to, it's totally fine. It's what works for
for
each
their family.
person in each family that is what counts.
I agree with that as
Yeah.
well. So I just want to dig deep into your personality. So I've seen like you had went through, gone, like you did this, that, and a little more.
Too many things.
Yeah. Embracing change is the hardest.
Yeah.
And how did you do that? Like every time you say like, okay, what next? That's like a lot of people are too scared to even ask that question because like we are just comfortable with where we are, and that's how people like to be, maybe not outwardly but subconsciously we just want to sit and have the same job, or like how do you embrace the change?
It's that's a really good question, and I think it doesn't come without challenges. Anytime you pick up something new, you're starting, low.
Yeah.
So you have to give yourself grace to start at this level, knowing that you know nothing. And I think as you kind of move up, you have to have that sense of I still have so much to learn and I still have so much to grow. I think problems come up when in any field someone thinks that, oh, I know everything, right?
Yeah.
And even in relationships,
Yeah.
if someone's like, oh, I know everything, I'm like, yeah, okay, oh yeah. So let's see how that works out. But to me, I think a lot of the different changes were like just finding a path. Looking back now at these years since 95, since I came to the US, right? Why did I choose that degree? I chose that degree because I was interested in politics, and so I wanted that to be a field of study. And I'm interested in communications, so I chose. So this school, Boston University, had this joint master's program, so I went to it. But now, when I sit back, knowing what I know, I would have told my younger self, "What are you going to get out of this degree? Where are you going to work? What is your starting salary going to be?" Right?
I know.
And how are you going to, is that going to support you?
Yeah.
Where are you going to be 15 years down the line, 5 years? I never thought about any of that because I may have had the option of mentors, but I never thought to reach out and ask people, is this a good career choice? I never thought about, hey, what happens when I graduate? What happens to a lot of us is we fall into this pattern of, first I need to finish my degree, then I need to find a job. Then I need to get married, or I need to have a baby. Like it's like it's like these steps. But I think now I would go back and be like, okay, let's think about this more strategically. Let's think about, planning a little bit more. And I feel like a lot of my choices were not having either the ability to think that far ahead or not having mentorship or this long-term plan.
Yeah.
But along with that is finding your passion, right?
Yeah.
To me, obviously, prior to this, like local involvement, volunteer work is still a passion. But finding the law to me is like, after all these turns and all that, I found something that I love.
Yeah.
And I did as an attorney for, about 12, 13 years before this position with the court. Which is also a huge honor for me, right? With having others in the community recognize that, my work counts and matters to be able to lift me up into this position. So I would say that is the key. if you're able to find that early on,
Yeah.
then fantastic, because then you don't have to spend your life experimenting.
Yeah.
Instead, spend your life building.
Yeah.
Right? But I would say one thing. I don't think any of those experiences have gone to waste, because I was always able to learn.
Yeah, those are like those pieces in the puzzle. But I agree with mentorship, and that's one of my questions that I thought I should ask you, because a lot of people don't, even though they have an opportunity, it doesn't have to be like a paid, like a coach. It can be like someone superior to your work, at workplace, or from a different team. I do have like mentors in my company, and that helped me a lot. Could you say how mentorship or how taking that help helps the younger kids to get that to that level much faster, like bypass those steps and achieve success?
I think it's key. I think you have to get out of your comfort zone to do that, right? And I really think that in our community and even the broader community, there's always a willingness of people to give. But in order to do so, somebody needs to step out of their comfort zone. And so I say to students, and I say to my daughter and son all the time too, that if you're interested in something, you have to find people that you can talk to that will, but they're afraid or they're nervous and they're like, I don't know if I can say. And I tell them, it doesn't matter. There's no such thing as a stupid question, right? But if you don't know, and if you don't make the effort, how will you find out? Right? And so I've spoken to a lot of law students. I've spoken to high school students. I've spoken to even younger kids who ask me, and then they'll in the community they'll say, Jaya auntie, can you tell me about the law? Then I ask them, okay, what are you studying? Because I want to give them information based on what may be appropriate for them. I'm not going to talk to a middle schooler and tell them how difficult it is to get a job or to pass the bar. Or, that's just pouring water over their dreams or whatever, right? But to kind of tell them that pay attention to certain things. So if I was talking to someone in college saying, I want to pursue the law, I tell them what I learned through my mistakes and experiences. And one of the key things that I tell them is, think about where you want to practice. Because a lot of times people will go all over the country to go to law school, but then they'll come back to California and they'll say, I want to practice here. And I'll say, you spent 3 years of your law student life building a network outside California.
Okay.
And so now you want to come back and get a job here, which is great, it's fine, but it's going to be harder. Because you now have to work with those law students that spent 3 years building the network here. So why would someone hire you over them? Right?
I know.
So, but these are things that I've actually had a couple of students say, wow, I never thought about that.
I know.
And I'm like, great. I love it, because I'm here telling you to learn from me.
I know. I think those are very insightful. They don't, we don't have to reinvent the wheel again.
Exactly.
If you learn from someone who has gone through that path, it's easier.
But had that student not reached out or taken the uncomfortable step of talking to a stranger and saying, can you please spend 15-20 minutes with me, or can I be in touch with you, or whatever, then it would never have happened, right?
I like that perspective. And so whenever you're stepping out of your comfort zone, I know there's some resistance, right? Should I even do that? You're internally, your brain that chatter would be there. How do you empower your mind, that chatter? How do you shut it off, or what is the strategy that you follow?
This applies universally, right? It's not unique to me. Even now at this stage, I have to have my mentors say to me, you can do this. Because believe it or not, there is hesitation. Like if somebody says, okay, hey, have you thought about this next step, or this award, or applying for this achievement? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Me? No. Like if I look at the previous recipients or whatever, I don't qualify. And they're like, I'm telling you, you qualify. Why won't you apply? And then I really have to sit back and think of if somebody else is saying that they see this in me, why am I blocking my own path?
Wow. Yeah.
right? So I think it happens to everyone, because when you think of yourself and you think of where you are, you don't see how far you've come,
Yeah.
right?
I know.
I think of you.
Yeah.
Like to be here at this time, at this point of your life, growing up in this village where you've had these experiences. Did you ever see yourself here?
No. I did my master's in biotechnology. I always wanted to be in India, you know. I was, but then I got married, and then when I came to Cincinnati, I flew to Cincinnati, and my way to my place, my first home, I felt like, how foolish am I to not even venture this out? You know, I would have missed all this.
Yeah, exactly.
So and then I had that appreciation. Okay, you know what? You should never be crab in the well. You know, you just have to come out of
exactly. You have to give yourself the ability to try.
At least try, you know, like
Exactly.
whether you fail or succeed, that's immaterial, you know.
Absolutely.
Like, I feel like maybe with the podcast thing also, I have been pushing it off for like so many years. I had this feeling for like several years, and then I thought like, okay, you know what, I should try, I should give it a try.
You should absolutely try.
Yeah. So another thing is like every person has 24 hours, and I know you have, but then you do this, you have two kids, you know, you must be a soccer mom or some kind of a sport, running around with errands.
And you know,
and then
you know that all of this is impossible without a partnership, right? So I really have to give credit to my husband and the community, because without our friends, without him, without others supporting you, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. So anytime I look at famous people, right, people always think of, oh wow, look at how much they achieved. I'm thinking about, what is their support network like? Because I know guaranteed 100% they would not be where they are without their support network. And they don't get acknowledged, right? I mean, do we acknowledge my next door neighbor for helping out with something at the grocery store because I forgot or whatever? No, we don't. But at the same time, without their help, I wouldn't have had time to do something else. Or without my friends watching my kids, I wouldn't have had time to submit an application, or to submit, or to go and, you know, right here, right now, you know, one child is with the husband, and I told my son, I said, look, you know, he's going to wake up late, it's summer holidays. I said, are you okay making breakfast? You want me to make something and go? He said, no mom, I'm fine, I'll take care of myself. So without that confidence or support, you, me, others would not be able to do anything.
Yeah, I agree with
So I can't take any credit on my own, right?
I just want to know a little bit of childhood, because the community service doesn't come, you know, like it has to be somewhere from your parents or some influence in your growing up age that you are drawn towards to do this kind of service. Like, can I know a little bit of what your upbringing is, and
yeah, absolutely. And I think I would credit this to my dad. So my father, as you know, is a former member of parliament from Machilipatnam in India. And
may I know his name so that
Jaya Badiga Ramakrishna.
Okay.
And so growing up, he was just our dad, businessman, interested in politics at that time. And thanks to him and to his efforts, we never lacked anything, comfort or access or education or anything like that. But what struck me about him from a young age, and I still remember this very clearly, in India for New Year's and stuff, there'd be parties, right? So I remember going to this one club party or something like that for New Year's, and we were driving home, and my dad would always bring us home before midnight because he didn't want to deal with the crowds, and he was afraid that something's gonna happen because people drink and party and all that, right? So we'd be driving home before midnight. And then while driving, this one time, I think I was in 7th or 8th class, and he said, I want you to know that the New Year is coming, and we have to be grateful for everything we have. But you also have to think about the poor and the common man and think about what you can do for them. And to me, it's like, wow, instead of like partying or, drinking or dancing or enjoying, someone's telling you to think about somebody else.
Yeah. Less privileged.
Less privileged and recognizing that you have the ability to do or give,
help,
right? And so that I've always taken to heart. And so, financially, I try to donate where I can. But to me, not everyone has the ability to give financially. So then I always think about what can I give, right? And my time. And so I've done, as you know, a volunteer work. I've volunteered for the school, as a member of the parent-teacher, participating in that, coming up with the panel or other areas of interest. When I was a lawyer, my husband would joke and said, I've never seen a lawyer that like you that donates more time than they bill for. Every time I got off the phone or something like that, this is during the pandemic, right? He'd be like, was that a work call? Because it's confidential. He's not around. I was like, yeah. Are you going to bill for it? I said, it's not our business. And so he'd be like, there you go. The kids are like, your mother is the best volunteer attorney I've ever seen. But it gives me satisfaction, right? Because see, I wouldn't be in this place if not for everything that kind of led me here. And so I feel like if I can pay it forward some way, then to me that sense of what is your purpose on earth, like it's a spiritual thing, but it's also that you need to not only be grateful for everything that you've received, but find a way to give it back.
I know. I tell my child, like, giving gives you more contentment, like when you take a gift, it's just a pleasure and it's momentary. But then when you give, like imagine that person, the other person, it's so valuable for them, right?
Absolutely.
And especially the kind of work that you do, whether it's for like the women that you have worked in the past, those calls mean a lot because we never know, like they might have ended up their life or like some other decision which was detrimental.
That's very true. And until it happens, you won't really know, right? Because it's so volatile.
And so do you have like a morning routine or some kind of a routine to unwind yourself or to work towards the day?
That's a good question. So I would say if on a typical weekday routine, I don't know if it's unwind, but I always have had to drive for work. So whether it was full serve to Sacramento and I don't mind driving. But one of the things I really enjoy on my drives is I listen to a lot of religious music. So I listen to Lalita Sahasranama more, Vishnu Sahasranama more, Adi Hridayam or something else. And I feel like to me that really supports my, not only my religion and values, but also provides me with like the spiritual foundation for the day. That, I'm setting the tone with regard to prayer and to requesting blessings and all of that. So that is something I typically do on a work day is I start my day with some kind of bhajan or hymn or something like that. It's usually while driving, on the road.
So it's nice. Okay. And then like sometimes it could be draining, like the cases you handle or, like you might how hard you try to, like no matter how hard you try to not get emotionally attached. So in those cases, like how do you cut yourself off from that situation?
No, and it's really hard, as you know, right? It's there was a time where I worked for this organization, Weave, and I was the managing attorney there. And about 4 years into it, I realized that my behavior started changing at home. That I started not wanting to go out. I was always angry at the kids. I was always like, not cooperative with my husband, and picking fights for the smallest reason, or for no reason, right? And then at one point he said, I think your cases are affecting you. And I was like, what rubbish. How can you say something like that, right?
Yeah.
Immediately said no. But then I started thinking about it, and he was right. My cases were affecting me.
Okay.
In this line of work, when you talk to any caregiver, not just me, but if you talk to someone that works in ER, you talk to someone that's a physician, you talk to someone that does volunteer work with homeless. When you have a job that requires giving, right, or listening, have you heard of vicarious trauma?
No.
So vicarious trauma is trauma that you get as a result of listening or participating in somebody else's trauma.
Oh, wow.
And so in terms of diagnosis and recognizing, someone can have a PTSD diagnosis through vicarious trauma.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, even though you're not
directly involved in the trauma because of the work that you do.
Okay.
So
I'm getting goosebumps.
no, but it's true, right?
Because
it impacts you. So I think it's something that I have to regulate almost on a daily or hourly basis. Sometimes when I get upset or angry, I really have to think about what is causing this. Is it what I heard? Is it what somebody did? And how is it affecting me? Then you realize, it is affecting me. Then you have to step back and say, okay, you've got to let it go. Yeah. So you've got to find a way to let things go. And nobody's perfect. So I'm going to admit that it doesn't happen easily, right? But you have to also recognize that if it's then interfering with your life or causing harm or stress, or you really need to kind of take a step back and get some tools in place.
Oh, okay. On this note, I would like to know how a lot of people hesitate to go to see a therapist or a psychologist. What would you advise to people who identify? Most times they don't identify it. It's the immediate family who gets affected.
Right.
So attempting, at least go checking out a therapist, what would you suggest to those folks?
So I would say absolutely. I highly recommend it. And in fact, I've been to therapy in the past. It's not easy. It's difficult, it's uncomfortable, you sit back and you're like, wait, what just happened here? But I feel that there's value in allowing a professional, because at the end of the day, all of these people are trained people. Okay, there's value in allowing a professional to help you.
Okay.
And if you honestly believe that, if you're so against it that it's not going to help you, then don't do it, but find another way. Is that going to be going to the gym? Is that going to be doing yoga? Is that going to be taking a walk or running for 30 minutes? I don't know. But if therapy is not going to work for you, then find another way. Because I will not accept non-action or inaction as an answer. Because nothing's going to change.
Sure, and it's going to get worse.
Oh, absolutely.
And then most immigrants might have this question with the confidentiality and all that when you see a therapist. So what do you think about that?
So that is absolutely a condition. There's also what is known as a therapist-patient privilege. That's a legal term. Okay. Both your medical records are confidential, right? And your therapy sessions are also going to be confidential. Okay. It takes a lot for somebody to be able to get your therapist to court to testify.
Okay.
And so I would say that do not worry about the impact of that.
Okay.
It's not going to reflect on your any immigration status or anything or paperwork. It's not going to reflect, your criminal record or anything like that. Therapy. And there are laws in place that protect what you say to the therapist. I mean, obviously there are other things that fall outside of it. So for instance, there's, if you disclose to your therapist or psychiatrist or a doctor that you want to harm somebody and that you have a plan in mind or whatever,
Okay.
that stuff can be disclosed.
Yeah.
And that stuff can be reported because obviously nobody
Yeah.
wants you to go out
Yeah.
and hurt or kill somebody.
Yeah.
But for most of us that don't have these immediate desires to hurt or kill somebody, right?
Yeah.
I think therapy is really needed and a good thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I think this closing at this note would be like the good, good way. I think it's going to be a very interesting for the viewers to view because we have discussed a lot of important points. And thank you very much for your time, Jaya. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course, absolutely my pleasure, Varuna. And thank you for doing, what is your passion, right? I'm sure that it'll be a matter of time before I start hearing about your podcast. So, do you have a name for your podcast, or you're just working on it?
It's called Deep Dive with Varuna. I have a YouTube channel, and this is going to be posted.
Fantastic! And when are you going to promote that?
I want you guys to promote it.
Okay, well, right now you've heard Varuna say the channel is Deep Dive with Varuna. And what are you asking people to do?
I want to take inspiration from whatever the snippets that like they've learned from this and then implement in their life.
And how will they know if you have new podcasts or?
I do put it on Instagram.
Okay.
And then
and what is your Instagram?
It's also Deep Dive with Varuna.
Okay. All right. You heard it here.
Thank you.